Here's KCTV5's investigative reporter, Stacey Cameron.
This is the governor's office at the Capitol. We emailed, picked up the phone and called, even stopped by, asking if someone could sit down and explain some of the spending. No luck.
So we've come all the way from Kansas City to get someone in this company to talk. And they send you up instead to throw me out.
And I can tell you as a lawyer, unless the state and that company tear up this contract, that problem is not going to be fixed. Companies on frac focus aren't disclosing chemicals that they consider trade secrets. So if you're open to full disclosure, why not disclose those chemicals as well? We want to get this taken care of where the harassing phone calls in and where Ms. Linder can get her $150 back. This is a 79-year-old woman.
But as you're about to see, these lights come with the defect that the government and Toyota are doing little to fix.
If you don't want to be in here and answer the question, that's fine. But if anyone who's in this room while we're filming is subject to being filmed.
Add it all up, and you have $250,000 that the governor won't explain. But of course, Mr. Brownback, that invitation to sit down and talk is still open.
In the back corner of a dialysis clinic in Lee Summit,
8 hours from 9 to 5 in the morning.
Lola Parker sits patiently, hooked up to a machine that does the work her kidneys no longer can. It's a life-saving ritual she undergoes all night, 3 times a week.
And hopefully my blood pressure stays up and I get a real good run.
Before the nurse puts a tube in Parker's arm and a dialysis machine begins whirling the waste out of her blood, Parker performs another ritual of sorts. It starts at home, with her packing an overnight bag, grabbing her walker to get to a chair, where she sits and waits for a call, telling Parker her ride to dialysis is on the way.
Hello? I'm doing good. How are you?
Right now, because of back surgery, Parker can't drive. So a company, paid by state Medicaid, picks her up, takes her to the clinic. It's a short 15-minute drive, one keeping her alive. While Parker isn't having trouble with this driver, in November, it was a different story.
Just about every trip.
Back then, Parker's ride started coming too, sometimes 3 hours late. One Sunday evening, the driver didn't come at all. Parker missed her appointment, got deathly ill, and ended up in the hospital.
After that Sunday night, I decided, okay, this is it. That's when I called you. I'm not doing it anymore.
With Parker fed up and sure she wasn't alone,
and I know that there are others that are having the same problems,
we wrote the state Medicaid agency. Our open records request revealed 783 patient complaints in the past 3 months. 212 times a driver simply didn't show. At least 20 patients missed dialysis appointments. Like Parker, 2 more people were hospitalized, putting you, the taxpayer, on the hook for thousands of dollars in extra medical costs.
I've gone as far as I can go.
As it turns out, just as Parker's problem started, Medicaid hired an out-of-state company, Atlanta-based Logisticare, to run the transportation program here in Missouri. It's a $30 million contract between the state and the company. On the phone, a Medicaid spokesperson refused to discuss the growing number of complaints against Logisticare and the agency's oversight of that company. So we took a trip to the agency's main office in Jefferson City.
Stacey Cameron with KCTV5. Is Seth Bundy in?
Initially told that a spokesperson or the agency's director would meet with us, we waited. A half hour later,
they don't really have the authority to do an interview, and I just didn't want to leave you sitting here.
Oh, I appreciate that.
We got locked out of the office without any answer. But across the street at the state capitol,
I think it wants a little looking into, Stacey.
We got a different reception from State Representative Keith Frederick.
When we're talking pretty significant numbers of patients, it seems to me that rises to the level of requiring some response from our department.
Frederick is a member of the state's Medicaid Oversight Committee.
If the contractor, the company that's been asked to do this, is really not doing their job, well, it's our job to see that they do that job or to place.
When we informed him that the trouble with Logisticare extends beyond the borders of the Show Me State, that in Michigan, Mississippi, and Wisconsin, patients and lawmakers are seeking investigations, Frederick said he'll get the state Medicaid office
Probably just go to the top of the food chain.
and Logisticare to answer our questions, since the company is now getting $30 million of Missouri taxpayer money.
Maybe we can do another segment in a little while when we see what actually transpires from this.
At the dialysis clinic in Lee Summit, Parker says accountability is all she ever wanted.
Something has to be done. Our lives is at stake.
As a lawyer, I also reviewed the agency's contract with Logisticare, and what I learned, as insult to injury in this case, it's a 62-page document, and Logisticare still gets paid by the state, even when someone like Lola Parker never gets picked up. And Brad, that's a fact right there that should have every taxpayer in Missouri upset. What do you think should happen when a nursing home fails to provide basic services to senior citizens and creates safety risks to residents? When those conditions were reported inside an Olathe nursing home, the federal government pulled its funding, but the state of Kansas is doing nothing to shut the place down.
Roaches in the hallways, the roaches in the bedrooms, the roaches everywhere.
Teresa Squire
It was really, really bad. Very neglectful.
and Margaret Farley
They're at high risk for any number of things.
don't know one another, but they share a common concern: Royal Terrace Nursing Home in Olathe.
I think the state should shut down and forget about it.
I don't know why that facility is still open.
Until recently, Squire was a Royal Terrace resident.
I still have friends there.
Farley is a leading expert on nursing home regulation and a lawyer with Kansas Advocates for Better Care.
I'm the president of that organization.
Both women want to know why the state didn't shut down the place in July when the home lost federal funding.
How bad does it have to be in a nursing home for it to lose its Medicaid and Medicare certification?
Well, it has to be pretty bad, and it has to be pretty bad over a period of time.
How bad did life get at Royal Terrace? These annual inspection reports tell the story. In February, inspectors found things here like filth and roaches in resident rooms in the dining hall, staff failing to wash hands after handling urine-soaked briefs, and people like Squire stranded in the restroom.
45 minutes to an hour, and your legs are going to sleep while you're sitting on the toilet waiting for somebody to help you.
But the problems didn't stop there. The reports also reveal a list of safety issues.
Injuries from falls. They may be losing weight. They may have undiagnosed medical conditions.
The growing number of problems called deficiencies led to the conclusion that Royal Terrace was out of substantial compliance with regulatory requirements. According to the federal government, the average number of deficiencies in Kansas is 10.8, but Royal Terrace nearly tripled that number, racking up 28 deficiencies.
After that point in time, Medicare and Medicaid say enough is enough. We're not going to be paying for this substandard care.
When Royal Terrace lost that funding, Squire says care in the facility got even worse.
I don't think it's right for people to have to live that way. I think people have to be able to have dignity and respect wherever they live.
Generally, what happens is that they lose Medicare and Medicaid, and at the same time they lose their license.
Then how do they keep their license?
I do not know the answer to that. It would be a good question for the state licensure authority.
That authority is the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services. We wanted to ask the state why Royal Terrace didn't lose its license, but the woman hired to speak for the agency wouldn't sit for an on-camera interview. Now, after numerous phone calls and emails, she refuses to return our messages.
How common is it for a nursing home to lose its Medicaid and Medicare certification?
It's very uncommon.
Uncommon, Farley says, because homes are allowed to fix problems long before certification is yanked. In fact, after the February inspections, Royal Terrace got 3 chances to get its act together. Each time, the home failed.
You have to wonder if they really know how to manage a facility.
I think the state government is at fault. That's my opinion. I think they're at fault. I think they should put me into it completely. Stop it from continuing on. These are human lives they're dealing with. You know, they're dealing with human people.
We reached out to the company that owns Royal Terrace, Consulate Management in Florida. They say they're making great strides to fix the problems. But when I asked for an interview and proof, they declined,
fearing that could jeopardize their relationship with the state. From what we've been told, it appears Royal Terrace is about to get its federal funding back. Meanwhile, some lawmakers we contacted about these conditions have promised to look into the matter. From 2005 to 2009, Toyota manufactured this car, the second-generation Prius. Close to 700,000 were sold in the U.S., and Toyota's iconic hybrid came with these optional lights, called high-intensity discharge headlights. But as you're about to see, these lights come with a defect that the government and Toyota are doing little to fix.
It was just an annoyance for a long time.
At first, when a single headlight on Judith Kirby's 2005 Toyota Prius would flicker and go out, she learned to deal with it.
It may go off again in another 5 or 10 minutes, but I could get them to work again by turning them off and turning them on.
But a year ago, while driving 70 miles an hour down I-35, both headlights started flickering and at the same time went dark.
A very out-of-control feeling.
Fortunately, Kirby got the lights back on. But when she took her Prius to a Toyota mechanic the next morning,
he came to me and told me that both of the headlights needed to be replaced.
Kirby isn't alone. In 2009, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration opened an investigation after getting 340 headlight complaints like these.
My lights shut off completely. I heard a smack, got out of my vehicle, and found a woman standing on the side of the road. My passenger side mirror hit her elbow.
My headlights went out. I almost killed my wife and I. A car was just beginning to pass me, and I lost vision on the right side.
I was driving on a dark country road. Both went out. I applied the brakes while trying to hold the car straight so I didn't strike a tree or pole at the side of the road.
Instead of forcing Toyota to recall the Prius, NHTSA closed its investigation after only 4 months, saying the growing problem wasn't a safety defect trend.
And they should have continued the investigation to see what would happen to the cars as they got progressively older.
Clarence Ditlow is executive director with the Center for Auto Safety.
We're a consumer group that got the Ford Pinto recalled in the 70s, worked on Firestone tires.
He's now urging NHTSA to reopen its investigation and recall the second-generation Prius.
What a recall would do is make the Prius what it should have been, a safe car with lighting at night. NHTSA rushed to close this case before the evidence was in.
We examined every Prius complaint in NHTSA's database and found 1,700 owners now reporting headlight failure. That's 5 times the number of complaints that prompted NHTSA's original investigation.
It puts it in the top 10% of all complaints.
If 1,700 headlight failures doesn't seem like a big problem, Ditlow says, think again.
There's always far many more complaints that the manufacturers receive than NHTSA because the average consumer has never even heard about NHTSA.
Just last year, the manufacturer here, Toyota, settled a class action lawsuit with almost 300,000 Prius owners over the headlight defect. The company ended up extending the car's warranty and paying each owner roughly $365 for new bulbs, but that didn't fix the problem, because Kirby and a growing number of Prius owners say those new bulbs are now failing.
It happened about 3 months afterwards, after we had them repaired.
Ditlow says that's just one piece of evidence suggesting the defect is something more serious than a bad bulb in the headlight.
What you're going to have to do is redesign the headlight operating system.
NHTSA disagrees. Its report mirrors Toyota's conclusion that Prius headlights extinguish due to bulb failure. The agency also dismisses the notion that both Prius headlights go out at the same time.
If you look at a car that's been on the road for 6 or 7 years, as these vehicles now have, the likelihood that the both are going out has increased significantly.
Both headlights do go out. Maybe not always, but it does happen.
In addition to Kirby, we discovered 238 Prius owners filing new complaints about double failures with NHTSA.
And when you have headlights failing on the road, they should simply call Toyota stuff and say, okay, we're going to sue you to force a recall.
So why isn't the agency ordering Toyota to recall the second-generation Prius?
Unfortunately, you need a body count. The agency is not going to put a lot of resources into an investigation where they don't have any crashes, deaths, or injuries yet.
Of course, we tried contacting NHTSA and Toyota for an on-camera interview. NHTSA declined, saying it doesn't grant interviews and it doesn't comment about investigations. Instead, the agency said it will let its report speak for itself. As far as Toyota goes, the company maintains that changing the bulb will fix the problem. Stacey Cameron, KCTV 5 News.